Can I ask you, you have all the inside knowledge. That was a joke from Ramaphosa. Trump says, I'll take the plane. Ramaphosa looks stunned. I don't think they scripted, I don't think they gamed that out.
Mehdi, I've been saying, I said it on another episode that I know Ramaphosa likes to crack jokes. And I actually spoke to his advisor and the Minister of International Relations. I said, okay, listen, I'm having a debate with people, especially Americans. This is the interpretation. Ramaphosa was joking. Trump takes it seriously. Yep. But the media here thought that Ramaphosa was indirectly making a jibe at Trump, saying you are doing something illegal.
It was clearly a joke, but I don't think they anticipated that Trump would come back so seriously.
All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the Readiness Report with the Daily Maverick, South Africa's foremost independent place for robust journalism, truth, as we try to understand what is going on in the world around us. Now, I live in the United States, as you all know, and every single day there seems to be drama after drama. Just last night, the US Court of International Trade basically told Donald Trump, you can't just impose tariffs. That is the job of Congress. So I wonder, does Trump know these things? He knows, but he does them anyway, just for optics, to create havoc, and to play to the gallery. That's one thing. And then Elon Musk, who has been at the forefront of a disinformation campaign against South Africa, announces that he's formally going to, tone down, withdraw from DOGE. He's not going to be playing a role in the Trump administration. And there are suspicions that there's some conflict or some tension between him and Donald Trump. Look, I could have told you for free that this bromance was going to end at some point. But at what cost? What has been Elon Musk's impact on the psychology of the United States, on state-to-state relations, the power that he had to interfere in elections, to articulate which candidates he preferred, and of course, who can forget the lie that is still reverberating in different corners of America about a white genocide in South Africa. So I thought I'm going to invite Mehdi Hasan. And if you're not a subscriber to Zeteo News, where have you been? Get out from underneath that hole. You need to subscribe for the very theme that I started with, independent, robust journalism that also calls out the media itself. Mehdi, welcome.
Redi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so very much. Okay, every single day in the United States feels like one dramatic soapy after another. In a few words, how would you describe American society under Trump?
A shit show. It is a shit show. I don't know. I once said on the BBC and I said I can't say shit show. I don't know what you can say on your show, but I'm calling it a shit show. It is, that's an understatement. It is, if term one of Trump was a lot, this is term one on steroids. Really, he said in his address to Congress, I've done more in my first 100 days than most presidents do in 4 years. And Donald Trump lies with almost every breath. But, they say it's like a stopped clock is right twice a day. He was right when he said that. He wasn't lying. He did it. He has done more than most presidents do in 4 years. It's just he's done more damage. He's done an astonishing amount of damage to the United States government, to U.S. society, and to the wider world. And that's what we're seeing. And Elon Musk as well, who you just mentioned in your intro, is leaving a failure, but a failure who's done massive damage to the global humanitarian scene.
What is the big idea, though? So, post the Cold War, you had the United States wanting to prevent another world war. Of course, we can debate the proxy wars that were fought on African soil even. There's that reality. But there was an idea, an ideology, the liberal order led by the United States. What is Donald Trump's end game here?
It's a good question. I don't think anyone really knows what his end game is. I don't think he knows what his end game is because as the Russian state TV mocked him the other day, he has a very strong view until the very next day when he has the opposite view. He's a deeply erratic, impulsive, inconsistent person. He lost his temper this week when a journalist pointed out that on Wall Street he's mocked as the taco guy. Trump always chickens out, TACO. Is the new acronym for Trump on Wall Street. That made him really angry, and he called the reporter.
Said
that's
nasty
a nasty
question or something.
Yeah, nasty question. He always says that to female reporters. Don't say that again. So no one really knows what he's up to, but I think it's two very short answers. One is Trump is in it for himself. Ultimately, it's not about ideology or politics or party concerns. It is about Trump. Trump cares only about Trump. And therefore, as long as he enriches himself, as long as he empowers himself, As long as his ego is coddled, he'd love to be, you know, you remember that video he put out of Gaza? He'd love to be a golden statue. He'd love to be on Mount Rushmore. He'd love to get a Nobel Prize. And of course, he and his family are making a ton of money. It's the most corrupt administration of our lifetimes, openly corrupt. That's one thing. And then the other thing is the people around him. What do they want? I think they want to make America into Hungary. They want an autocracy, an illiberal democracy, whatever you want to call it, where they are permanently in charge, pushing their Christian nationalist far-right vision of America, whether it's in schools, high schools, universities, whether it's in the workplace where they're launching attacks on DEI. They want to roll back some of the progress you mentioned, both in terms of the liberal international order and international law and international trade, but also domestically, the civil rights era and civil rights legislation. They want to roll a lot of that back. You know, when they say make America great again, Redi, I always say, when was it great? What year do you want to go back to? Let us know which year that is. Was it the 1950s? I suspect it was sometime in the 50s, pre-civil rights era.
But let's talk a little bit about then how other states or countries are reacting to this reality. I mean, Canada's Carney, I think he did relatively well in that Oval Office. But Trump and his lieutenants are talking about some sort of commercial diplomacy, that it's all about the deal. And as somebody who comes from South Africa, where I know that there are values that we hold dear, Ubuntu, humanity is not out of fashion. Human rights, a place for all, respecting minority rights, and so on. Those things matter. My big concern is how others posture in relation to Trump. Do you enable him because it's all about the deal, or you hold steady and defend those sacrosanct values?
No, I agree with you. And look, Donald Trump is your classic school ground bully, right? And the only way you deal with a bully is you stand up to the bully. You don't indulge the bully. And unfortunately, American institutions have not understood this. Every media company keeps bending the knee. CBS is now offering a settlement for a ridiculous lawsuit that Donald Trump brought against CBS because he didn't like how they edited an interview of Kamala Harris. Insanity. ABC already settled with him. You see the big law firms falling one after another. There is strength in numbers, right? Two things with a bully. One, you've got to stand up to a bully. Two, you've got to stick together against the bully and not let the bully play divide and rule. And Donald Trump is a master of doing both. He's a master of bullying and a master of dividing and ruling. And I think the international community, if there is such a thing, you know, or even European countries, let's start with Europe, you know, they kind of understand that on Ukraine, for example, they're on their own. They're trying to now form an alternative defense alliance. They can't rely on the US. They can't rely on NATO. When it comes to action on climate change and other issues that the world holds dear, the US cannot be counted upon. Health, for example. The United States, Argentina under Milei pulling out of the World Health Organization when we've got a new strain of COVID, when we've got bird flu threatening us. I think people are understanding now you have to work around the United States, right? You're not going to be able to work with or through the US. I think that's important, but it needs to be stepped up a gear. I mean, Donald Trump is an old-fashioned narcissistic bully. And with a bully, you must push back hard, and then they bend. And I think Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico has done a very good job of being polite and respectful in public, but very, very strong in terms of where she stands. And that's why he's done a taco. You know, that's why Trump always chickens out. Every tariff he's threatened to put on Mexico and Canada, he's backed away from. The same with the Chinese, who have held pretty firm. Even though he claims to be friends with Xi Jinping, the Chinese haven't backed down. So I think that is the key, right? You've got to stand up to a bully. You give Trump an inch, he will take a mile.
So what I find interesting also is the Russia-US relationship. Who can forget that Trump promised to end the war within 24 hours? I mean, going as far as calling Zelensky a bully, and those memories of him being a dictator, I beg your pardon, that the being Zelensky'd in the Oval Office. And now there's the Russian President Putin showing Trump how he plays this game. He's not going to bend to Trump's will. What do you make of that relationship?
So I think it's really interesting. There's two ways that international leaders have tried to get the better of Trump and have gotten the better of Trump. One is the Gulf way. You shower him with praise and money, and you basically buy him off because he's easily buyable. And that's been obvious from the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis. And then you've got the Vladimir Putin way, which is F you, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. He tried a little bit of manipulation and flattery, but ultimately the Russian position is the Russian position. They were never going to budge. And they haven't budged. And Trump could do all he wants to try and blame Zelensky for it, but the Russians have made clear that they are the true obstacle to peace. They are the ones who illegally invaded and occupied Ukraine. They are the ones who continue to bomb civilian targets in Ukraine and seize territory. And it's interesting that for years, the Trump people told us it's all a conspiracy to say Trump is soft on Russia. J.D. Vance was very keen to say Trump is tougher on Russia than Obama was. There was this line like Trump gave rockets and weaponry to Zelensky. Obama gave pillows and all sorts of nonsense. And yet Trump, the classic thing really with Trump, and I hope your listeners, viewers appreciate this point, people will go out to defend Donald Trump and he will throw them under the bus. He will undermine their defense of him in real time. So you have people going out saying, Trump is tough on Russia. Stop it. You're a conspiracy theorist if you say he's soft on Russia. And then Trump comes out and says it himself this week on social media, on his Truth Social site, I protected Russia. It would have been much worse for Putin if it wasn't for me. Thanks, Donald. You just undermined every defense that your people have offered for you. He's now said it openly that he didn't outline how. Who knows behind the scenes what happened. But he is saying that there are things he did to protect Vladimir Putin from the horse's mouth. Things would have been worse for Putin had it not been for Donald Trump. That's what many of us have said for years. And we were told that we have Trump derangement syndrome, that we're conspiracy theorists, that this is Russiagate. I mean, Trump's relationship with Russia is very, very clear. It was a financial relationship before he became president. It's been a very soft on Putin political relationship. He's in awe of Putin. You see the body language when he's with Putin. The one point I always make is I can find Trump insulting every world leader. I can find you Trump attacking every world, even the ones he likes, even the ones he's allies with right now. Saudi Arabia, for example, he's allied with. But I can get you tape of Trump attacking the Saudis during the 2016 campaign, saying they were behind 9/11 and etc. He loves Kim Jong-un now, right? He says,
yes,
we exchange love letters.
admires him.
But go back to 2017. He called him Little Rocket Man. He called him fat. He threatened him with nuclear warfare. With Putin, you can find nothing. I challenge anyone watching or reading this to find a Donald Trump insult to Vladimir Putin going back 10, 15, 20 years. Can't be done. Why?
Very, very interesting. Okay, you mentioned something that he publicly states that, you know, he's done Putin a favor. He's basically bent the
quiet
rules
part out loud is Trump is the king of that.
But has he not done that with Israel as well? Remember when Biden won the election, Benjamin Netanyahu was said to be the first leader to call Biden to congratulate him, and Trump was pissed off.
Yes.
And he actually said, F him,
Yeah.
and said, I did so much for him.
Yes.
I want to reflect on that moment, but also what you posted on X a couple of weeks ago. You suggested that this reported tension between Netanyahu and Trump is really nothing.
Yes.
American society and Israel, those intractable links. But Mehdi, I want to challenge you on that. South Africa was slammed repeatedly. And many of us believe that the white genocide was just a subterfuge. This matter was about South Africa, a small country at the tip of Africa, daring to go to the ICJ.
Agreed.
There was Ramaphosa sitting in the Oval Office. That matter didn't come up. I've spoken to people who were in that room, even in the private room. That matter didn't come up. What did Trump do in Yemen? He negotiates directly with the Houthis and then withdraws from there. And then with Iran, with Netanyahu sitting right next to him, he says he's going to, negotiate directly with Iran, with Hamas as well. There's now a line between the Trump administration and Hamas. I suspect there is some sort of tension between Bibi and Trump.
I mean, it depends on what you define as tension. I mean, there was some sort of tension between Biden and Netanyahu, and yet 50,000 Palestinians were still killed. I think, there's a whole genre of journalism from Barak Ravid, for example, of Axios, which has become almost a parody, where he says, Joe Biden's aides reportedly say Biden is frustrated with Netanyahu. Do you remember that? There was a headline like every other week for a month. Biden says, fuck Netanyahu in private. Great. He doesn't say it in public. He doesn't stop selling weapons to him. And now we're seeing the same genre from the same journalist, Barak Ravid and others. Yeah. Trump is frustrated with Netanyahu. He wants the war over. Great. I'm kind of fed up and tired of these leaks and these stories. I don't give a shit what they're saying in the Oval Office and behind the scenes. I care about what they do. With Donald Trump, it doesn't matter what he says. It's what he does. He says a lot of crap. What does he do? So you gave the example of Hamas. Yes, they have reached out and made direct contact with Hamas. They did get an American-Israeli hostage release, which Netanyahu tried to block. Agreed. And yet, this week, DropSite reports that when Hamas were ready to go on a Witkoff-written proposal for a ceasefire, the Israelis turned it down. What did the United States government do, the Trump administration? They blamed Hamas.
They blame Hamas.
So they're still playing the same American game of protecting Israel in public, no daylight. And frankly, I don't care what happens in private. I don't care if Donald Trump doesn't like Benjamin Netanyahu, Netanyahu doesn't like Donald Trump. I would remind you, by the way, that Netanyahu is best friends with Jared Kushner. So the rift is never, ever going to be a real rift between Trump and Netanyahu. And by the way, he doesn't like Netanyahu, not because of Israel, Gaza, or Palestinians. He doesn't like Netanyahu because, as you say, Netanyahu congratulated Joe Biden on winning an election. And that Trump has never really gotten over. But the reality is, it doesn't matter. I don't care whether they like each other. I don't care whether they talk to each other every day. I don't care whether Trump visits him in Tel Aviv. All I care about is, has US policy changed? No. Has it got better? No. Has it got worse? In many ways, yes. And it's weird that so many people who were so critical of Joe Biden, rightly critical of Joe Biden on Gaza, give Trump a pass. It's almost like we have some kind of collective desperation to believe that Trump is somehow different, unorthodox, will shake things up. I have Palestinians who tell me, we think Trump will be better for the Palestinians. As Palestinians are starving to death in Gaza on Trump's watch, as kids are being massacred, 9 kids of 1 pediatrician are being massacred on Trump's watch, as Israeli far-right politicians are coming out and saying, hey, we've got Trump's blessing to do ethnic cleansing, what we always wanted. They're saying it themselves. So forgive me if I don't really give a damn about reported tensions between Trump and Netanyahu. They can save that for their memoirs. I give a damn about what's happening in the ground in Gaza. And what's happening on the ground in Gaza is worse now than it's been for a long time. I mean, even under Biden, with all the death, and I'm no defender of Biden on Gaza, we never saw a 3-month siege with not a single item of food or aid or clothing or diaper going into Gaza.
And in fact, Trump did say that he will turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. So that is also that intention as well. So
he was also asked if Palestinians leave, can they come back? He said no. He said, that is Slobodan Milosevic. That is ethnic cleansing at its purest, rawest.
So I just want to talk a little bit about that, because that is a matter that is very close to my heart, and I make no apologies about it. I have my own experiences of being on legacy media, mainstream media, and the consequences that come with speaking out against Israel. You would know all about it. Your case was far more high profile. But I've been watching in the British Parliament, there's a Conservative MP who spoke out. The German Chancellor said what Israel is doing can no longer, and I tweeted sarcastically, no longer be justified as self-defense. When was it ever justified as self-defense? We are seeing some pockets of commentary which respectfully or non-respectfully is not commensurate with the extent of the horror that you see on the ground. But can we, even as we say, F you, it's not enough. It's not enough. Too little, too late. You're doing nothing. People are starving. An image of a little girl escaping a fire, journalists being bombed and killed, and so on. How do we situate this? Is there a change of sentiment? Never mind Trump, but just globally. Is there a change of sentiment, and can we maximize on it? What do we do with it?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about this. 100% there's a change in sentiment. No one can deny that. Not just the British, Canadian, French governments doing their kind of performative condemnations, but the Germans, as you say, coming out. And for people who are not aware of this, the German government is literally the most pro-Israeli government in the world, even in some ways more so than the United States government. It defines support for Israel as its reasons for existence, as its own reason for existing, right? That's how pro-Israel Germany has been. So even when the Germans come out and say these comments, the anti-Semitism commissioner in Germany came out and said, we can't say everything's anti-Semitic if it's anti-Israel. Whoa, they've been punishing people in Germany for being anti-Israel. So there's clearly a change. Piers Morgan on his show with me said, I no longer resist you, Mehdi. I now agree with you on Gaza. The Washington Post ran an op-ed from Shadi Hamid this week with the headline, it is a genocide. We have to say what it is, which is something they would not have run 6 weeks or certainly not 6 months ago. So things are changing. You see the Forward newspaper, Jewish community newspaper, publishing a piece from a rabbi saying, I can no longer defend this. What's happening? These are war crimes. Ehud Olmert, former Prime Minister of Israel, saying it's a war of annihilation. I have to say it now. I can no longer defend. So I can keep going. There's 100% a change in Israel, in Europe, in the Jewish community happening. Now, to go to your main question, too little, too late. Certainly too little. I mean, the British government said we're going to stop trade negotiations, and then they still sent their trade envoy to Israel. Unless you're cutting off arms, it's too little, right? Let's just be clear about that. As for too late, I'm torn on this. The cynic in me, the journalist in me, agrees with you and says, come on, no longer justified Germans? It was never justified. It says to the rabbi who's in the Forward newspaper, where were you for the last 19 months? It says to my friend Shadi Hamid, who's a friend of mine, oh, now you say it's a genocide. Last year you were saying it's clearly, it's not a genocide. What changed? So I think there is an argument for saying a lot of this, some of these people, Zadie Smith, the novelist, has been criticized for coming out now when she wrote a piece last year attacking campus protests. Now she's saying, oh, we need a ceasefire and this is bad. So there is a sense of, are people just trying to follow the wind, get on the right side of history belatedly, jumping on a bandwagon? And we can criticize them for that, sure. And that's the cynic and the journalist in me. But the other part of me, which is the person who just wants the killing to end and has to have hope that the killing can end and not be a nihilist, that person says, I don't care how late you are. I don't care how disingenuous you are. I'll take it. Get on board. We need to stop the killing. If Piers Morgan's switching, if Zadie Smith's switching, if the German chancellor saying a few words helps stop the genocide, I'll take it.
I'm getting goosebumps because I'm just, this is both personal and professional. And I'm just reflecting on what a severing of ties with certain institutions that are pillars to a normal functioning society, the United Nations, for example. And I know that there are agencies within the UN that are doing their best, that are speaking out,
Yes.
but all things come to a halt at the UN Security Council. And I also know that Israel and the US have been isolated in the votes on Israel and a ceasefire. More and more countries have come away from them, even the allies of the US. So that is something. But there is an institution that has been a part of my life as a 47-year-old. I've always just wanted to be a journalist. I've never done anything else with my life. But the severing of ties with mainstream media and how media itself needs a reckoning with how it enabled this genocide. Already, we're also seeing opinion pieces about how, and it's just a statistic, a certain percentage of Israeli society is not aware of what's happening in Gaza. Come on, cry me a river in this digital age.
Yes.
So I know that you started Zeteo, you are the editor-in-chief and the CEO. We don't have enough platforms, but I see some emerging to say we don't all have to be on these platforms that are stifling our voices.
Yes.
But when the bombs go off, when the guns go off, how do we relate to that edifice, the institution called the media, in relation to this crisis?
No, it's a big question. And just on the UN, by the way, I just want to say I wrote a piece for The Guardian several months ago saying that Israel should be expelled from the UN. And people got mad and said, well, this is holding Israel to a special standard. What about North Korea? And what about Syria? And what about Sudan? And, classic whataboutism defense. But Israel is sui generis here. It was a country that was created specifically by UN resolution. And yet today makes the UN Secretary General persona non grata, has talked about flattening the UN building in New York, has killed more UN employees than any country since the formation of the United Nations. Several hundred UN employees killed in Gaza. So it's unique in its assault on the UN, its rejection of the UN's authority. And I do think there should be an attempt to try and remove it from the UN. Even if it fails, symbolically, countries should stand up for the UN. In terms of the media, as you mentioned in your introduction, I'm someone who's been a media critic for a long time. Even when I worked at MSNBC, in the belly of the corporate beast, in the heart of US mainstream media, where I did a show on Sunday nights for MSNBC and during the week for Peacock, the streaming channel, I was openly critical of American media and mainstream media and corporate media and my former employers, the BBC, where I've also worked. I've worked at the BBC. I've worked at Sky News. I've worked at Al Jazeera. I've worked at NBC. And I think, look, especially these US news channels when it comes to Israel are super cautious, super cowardly, super deferential. They don't want trouble. They want to keep their heads down. They want to keep their jobs. That's anyone who's worked there knows that. I'm not saying something outrageous, controversial, surprising. Everyone knows this. And I think what's different now is in an age of independent journalism, some of us can call a spade, can call stuff out. One of the things I said when I launched Zeteo is we will say the F word, fascism, in context of Trump. We won't be afraid to say that. We will say the G word, genocide, in the context of Gaza. We won't be afraid to say that. We know from reporting by Dropsite and The Intercept and others that the New York Times had a memo saying, please don't say occupation, don't say ethnic cleansing, don't say genocide. We know that CNN, for example, a lot of its news coverage of Gaza has to go through the Israeli military censor's office. There is a lot of censorship. Americans think there's no censorship in the media, First Amendment. On this issue, there's a great deal of official censorship and self-censorship. And therefore, Zeteo is about, we're not trying to replace CNN. We don't have either the ambition or the resources to do that. What we are trying to say is our existence and our success and our growth is about demonstrating that there is another way to do journalism, that there is a way to talk about these issues in a much more direct, blunt, engaging, authentic way, which is what viewers and readers want.
Yeah.
People who read the New York Times don't want to see Donald Trump described as racially divisive. You could just call him racist. It's fewer letters. It's easier to say. This constant, desperate search for euphemisms, this tortuous use of language. People are fed up with this. Why people are tuning out. They want to be treated with respect. They want authentic journalism. They want convoluted headlines. And look, on Gaza itself, the complicity in genocide is very clear. For
Yeah.
19, 20 months, Israel has killed and massacred Palestinians on a scale that we have not seen in the 21st century. And yet, the same media that would condemn Vladimir Putin for bombing hospitals in Ukraine, that would condemn Slobodan Milosevic in the Balkans, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, etc., has held back out of fear of Israel in saying what's actually going on. The number of BBC headlines which are mocked online because they just refuse to say Israel. There's no agency, the passive headlines. Man loses 35 members of his family. I remember that one. What do you mean he lost?
Or children go hungry. Children go hungry,
yes. Or starvation looms like it's a natural disaster, not people being starved. As I say, my favorite one that I always cite was a man loses 35 members of his family. How did he lose them? Down the back of a couch? Like, what do you mean? No, they were killed by Israel. It takes about 30 paragraphs before you find any mention that Israel may have killed 35 members of his family. So that kind of coverage is outrageous. Just yesterday, New York Times coverage of the killings at the UN warehouse, where hungry, starving Gazans stormed the warehouse and they were shot at. I believe 4 or 5 were killed by Israeli troops. The New York Times tweet or headline or news alert said, Palestinian storm warehouse prompting Israelis to fire at them. Oh, it's their fault.
They're inviting it.
They prompted. They forced the Israelis to shoot them.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that the line from, I think it was Golda Meir, but one of the Israeli leaders who said, "We will never forgive the Palestinians for making us kill their children." And it's that the media have basically internalized that line.
Yeah, but I mean, even with the genocide, anything you say, release the hostages and this ends now, we know that to be a lie. Even the families of the hostages
it's still
themselves.
Repeated uncritically.
Yeah, the families of the hostages are saying that Israel has abandoned them.
The media approach to the Israeli government is to treat it all with huge deference and respect in a way we don't with other governments. So when Israel defenders say we're being held to a separate standard, actually, no, you've got a special standard. Because Vladimir Putin says, I bombed that hospital because there was a Ukrainian fighter inside. We don't go, well, that's what Vladimir Putin said. We have to take it literally. We say, he's lying and he's wanted for war crimes by the ICC. When it's with Israel, we treat it, we must give the Israeli side. And as I've pointed out, I said this on CNN, in the same way that it took American reporters many years to start questioning police reports about black people shot at traffic stops. And it took many years for American reporters to now to finally say, hey, maybe we shouldn't believe the police press release that they put out immediately after they kill a black guy at a traffic stop.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to apply that same skepticism. When will they learn that lesson when it comes to the IDF and the Israeli military statements about why they killed a Palestinian, which almost always turn out to be untrue?
Yeah. My last question to you, Mehdi. You are British American, and I know that you've got children. I have small children. I've just arrived in the US 2 years ago, living in London for a couple of years, working for the BBC, and then in South Africa. I know in South Africa, I can say whatever I want about Cyril Ramaphosa. Even if he reads it, nothing's going to happen to me. I know that if the Constitutional Court rules against the government, then they can't just ignore the Constitutional Court. I also know that it is South Africa that took Israel to court and continues to defy the voice from the United States and so on. I mean, that's a red line for South Africa. Many people will be saying, if South Africa wants to escape the executive orders and everything else, they must withdraw the ICJ case. There is no way that a South Africa that is run by a majority ANC country will withdraw that case. It's not going to happen.
Good to hear.
And South Africa seems to have prevailed because they never made that undertaking. But my question is, you living in the United States, I'm also reflecting on this. I'm a mother of 2 little girls. I see students here protesting, visas being revoked for just writing a harmless op-ed. Marco Rubio saying they're going to revoke and deny visas.
Marco Rubio saying he's proud. He would do it again,
He's proud, but then he's fighting other countries for stifling the free speech of Americans. It's cognitive dissonance on steroids. But as somebody, you British American, you've got a family, you're watching what's happening here. Your whole job is about speaking out. What kind of future do you want for these children that you brought here?
I mean, I want a future that's guaranteed by the Constitution. The United States Constitution has many flaws, Second Amendment, for example, but the First Amendment isn't one of them. And I think that's something that everyone, in a bipartisan way, not like the Second Amendment, which is very divisive, the gun amendment. The First Amendment was something everyone's supposed to agree with, Democrats, Republicans, independents. Everyone supports the First Amendment, but apparently the same party that screamed about free speech for years, once they took power in Congress, in the White House, in the federal government, in the judiciary, suddenly free speech, it doesn't matter. It's all what the Republicans decide is the speech they like. Marco Rubio now decides what people can and cannot say. He is Joe McCarthy on steroids. I mean, we talk about the McCarthy era. I don't think Joe McCarthy had the power that Marco Rubio has. Marco Rubio has dictatorial power. He can decide with the stroke of a pen as the Secretary of State under an obscure provision of the 1952 Immigration Act that he can decide you have to leave the country if you write something I don't like, which is what they tried to do to Rumey Öztürk, the Turkish student from Tufts, who a ICE fascistic gang in masks grabbed from the middle of the street in the middle of Ramadan and detained her for many months until she was recently released by a judge. So free speech is under assault in this country. And the shameless hypocrisy of people like Marco Rubio, it's a feature, not a bug. It is who they are. He didn't put that post this week saying, if you go after Americans' free speech rights, we will sanction foreign countries. He didn't do that unaware of the hypocrisy. He did it on purpose. They want to see what they can get away with. That is what's so fascistic and nihilistic and illiberal about them. They revel in the double standards, in the contradictions, in the hypocrisy. And look, I worry about everyone in this country, both citizens and non-citizens, who are being intimidated right now. Whether you are a big corporation like Paramount saying, well, CBS News, you got to stop doing, you got to settle with Donald Trump, or ABC Disney, which told the hosts of The View this last week, please stop talking about Trump so much, cut back some of your political coverage. Or the student I met yesterday, Pakistani student I met at an event in Cleveland, who said, I'd love to speak out like you do, but I'm on a visa. I can't. Like, what has happened to the United States where people are whispering what they want to say rather than saying it out loud and proud? And I think, again, as I said to you at the start of the show, the United States, a faction of the people in this country want the United States to be Hungary. And that is where we are heading very, very fast.
I am so delighted to have spoken to you, Mehdi. And of course, we would be poorer without Zeteo and
Thank you so much.
Your sterling work and contributors that you have there. Thanks for talking to us.
Great to see you hosting my favorite old show up front.
Yes. Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you. And I use that to bribe Mehdi to come on the Readiness Report.
No, you don't need to bribe me.
You don't need to bribe me. Home.
You don't need to bribe me. I'm not Donald
We're not
Trump.
Transactional.
I'm not like Donald Trump. I'm not Donald Trump. You're not Cyril Ramaphosa offering a plane in a joke and then he takes it seriously. By the way, can I ask you, you have all the inside knowledge. That was a joke from Ramaphosa. Trump says, I'll take the plane. Ramaphosa looks stunned. He didn't. I don't think they scripted. I don't think they gamed that out.
Mehdi, I've been saying, I said it on another episode that I know Ramaphosa likes to crack jokes. And I actually spoke to his advisor and the Minister of International Relations. I said, okay, listen, I'm having a debate with people, especially Americans. This is the interpretation. Ramaphosa was joking. Trump takes it seriously.
Yep.
But the media here thought that Ramaphosa was indirectly making a jibe at Trump, saying you are doing something illegal.
It was clearly a joke, but I don't think they anticipated that Trump would come back so seriously. They were stunned.
Exactly. It's like a little boy. Yeah, you know I've got a plane and you want to give me another one.
I'll take as many planes as I'll get. Wow. Thanks, Redi.
Bye, Mehdi. Bye.
Bye-bye.